Have you ever noticed that you're the one who always understands, even when no one tries to understand you? That you are the safe place for everyone else, while your own heart quietly bleeds in the background? Many people call this kindness. Some call it compassion. But I want to ask you a difficult question tonight. Is your empathy actually a trap? Because there's a kind of caring that isn't freedom. It is self-abandonment dressed as love. There is a form of giving that doesn't come from abundance. It comes from fear. Fear of losing someone. Fear of conflict. Fear of being seen as selfish. Fear of not being chosen if you stop over giving. And the body always knows the truth. It tightens. It gets tired. It whispers, "What about me?" Let's talk about that version of empathy, the one that hurts you while healing others, and why so many sensitive, loving people fall into it. Empathy is beautiful. It is the capacity to feel another person's pain as if it were your own. But somewhere in your story, maybe as a child, maybe in your first love, empathy stopped being a gift and became a survival strategy. You learned that to be loved, you must take care of others. You learned that your role was to soothe, to fix, to listen, to hold. You learned that your needs were negotiable, but their needs were urgent. So now you apologize too quickly. You forgive too easily. You give more than your heart can afford. You tell yourself, they are wounded, they didn't mean it. And you know what? That may be true, but so are you. Every time you silence your anger to keep the peace, you reinforce the belief that your emotions are dangerous. Every time you tolerate disrespect because they had a hard childhood, you abandon the child inside you who also had one. Every time you explain someone's behavior while excusing your own pain, you disappear a little more. This is not empathy. This is self-erasure. Real compassion includes you. Real love doesn't require your exhaustion as proof. Real kindness doesn't demand that you bleed quietly. Overgiving is often a symptom of an old wound, the wound of not feeling enough simply by existing. So you try to earn your place through service, caretaking, emotional labor. You become the therapist, the healer, the strong one. But inside, you are starving for reciprocity, for being held the way you hold others. And here is the difficult truth. If you always choose others over yourself, it is not love. It is fear of being abandoned by them and by yourself. Healing does not mean becoming harder. It means becoming honest. It means asking, do I give because I want to, or because I'm afraid not to? It means setting boundaries, not as punishment, but as self-respect. It means letting some relationships change when you stop over functioning. It means grieving the roles you no longer want to play. Your empathy is not the problem. Your heart is not the problem. The problem is the belief that you must disappear for love to stay. You don't. You deserve a love that doesn't require self-betrayal. And you deserve relationships where you can rest. You deserve to be cared for with the same tenderness you offer others. Your empathy is not meant to be a trap. It is meant to be a bridge, including back to yourself. Overgiving is often learned in childhood. Overgiving rarely begins in adulthood. It is not simply a habit you picked up in a relationship. It is a language your nervous system learned long before you had words for it. In childhood, love is not an abstract concept, it is survival. The child does not ask, is this relationship healthy? The child asks, what must I become so they will stay? If the environment around you is emotionally unpredictable, critical, distant, or overwhelmed, you adapted the only way a sensitive nervous system knows how. You became useful, you became attuned. You watched the moods in the room like weather patterns. You learned to feel other people faster than they could feel themselves. You became the child who didn't cause trouble, who anticipated needs, who softened your voice, who shrank your desires, who made yourself easy to love. And every time you did that, something inside you recorded a lesson. When I take care of them, I am safe. When I need nothing, I am acceptable. When I disappear, I am loved. So you grew up outwardly competent and inwardly hungry. You became the emotional adult before you finished being a child. You were praised for being mature, kind, understanding. Meanwhile, no one noticed the quiet cost. Your own needs fell to the bottom of the list so often that eventually you stopped noticing you had any. Overgiving is not generosity when it is fueled by fear. It is a strategy the small version of you created to avoid losing connection. That child inside you decided, if I am endlessly forgiving, endlessly patient, endlessly giving, they won't leave. And that belief hardens into personality. It starts to feel like this is just who I am. But it isn't. It is who you had to be. The longing you carry to be chosen without effort is the longing of that child to finally rest, to be loved without performance, without caretaking, without earning it through emotional labor. Until that wound is acknowledged, you will find yourself repeatedly drawn to relationships where you overfunction and under-receive because the nervous system confuses familiarity with love. Healing begins not with blame toward your caregivers, but with truth toward yourself. You did not overgive because you were noble. You overgave because your nervous system believed your existence alone was not enough. That belief once kept you emotionally alive. Now it quietly exhausts you. You don't need to hate the part of you that overgives. It protected you once. But it is time to teach your body a new lesson. That love does not have to be earned through self-abandonment. Explaining someone's behavior does not mean you must tolerate it. Understanding someone's story and accepting their impact on you are two very different things. Many empathetic people confuse the two. You learn about someone's childhood wounds, their trauma, their anxieties, the ways they were never held, and suddenly your own pain becomes negotiable. You say, I know why they are like this, and without realizing it, you place your feelings on the back burner like they are somehow less real because you can explain the cause. But explanation is not justification. You can see the roots of a person's anger and still acknowledge that being shouted at hurts your nervous system. You can understand that someone struggles with intimacy and still admit that their emotional distance leaves you lonely. You can recognize that a person is trying, while also recognizing that you are slowly collapsing under what they're trying still costs you. Your psyche may have learned early that compassion means self-erasure, that if you are kind, you should absorb the blows, silence your protest, and keep giving chances. You say to yourself, they didn't mean it, or they're wounded. And with each sentence, you step further away from your own truth. The body, however, does not participate in that negotiation. It reacts honestly with tightening sadness, irritation, or numbness. Regardless of how beautiful the explanation sounds in your head, you are allowed to say, I understand where this comes from, and it is still not okay for me. And this is not a lack of empathy. It is the presence of self-respect. It is recognizing that compassion which excludes you becomes a subtle form of self-betrayal. Tolerating behavior that harms you does not heal the other person's trauma. It only reenacts your own. Sometimes the most loving act is a boundary. Sometimes the most compassionate response is distance. Not because you demonize the other, but because you refuse to keep abandoning yourself in the name of understanding. You can hold both truths at once. You are hurting, and this is hurting me. Your body reveals when empathy has become self-betrayal. The body speaks long before the mind is willing to listen. When empathy turns into self-betrayal, it rarely begins with a dramatic realization. It begins with subtle signals in your nervous system. A tightness in the chest after yet another conversation where you minimized your needs. A heaviness in your limbs when you agree to something you don't actually want. A quiet resentment that you immediately judge yourself for feeling. You may tell yourself, it's not a big deal, or I'm just tired. But the body is telling the truth. Something in you is being crossed. The body does not lie to keep relationships intact. It does not rewrite stories to protect anyone's image. It simply responds. It contracts when your boundaries are ignored. It floods with anxiety when you sense you are about to abandon yourself again. It becomes exhausted not only from doing too much, but from constantly overriding your inner signals. Sometimes self-betrayal shows up as chronic fatigue that no amount of sleep truly resolves. Sometimes it appears as headaches, digestive issues, or a lingering sense of being on edge. Sometimes it looks like numbness, a shutting down of feeling altogether, because your system has decided it is safer not to feel than to feel, and keep doing nothing about it. You may think you are being understanding or patient, but your body experiences something different, a steady erosion of safety. Each time you smile when you want to protest, each time you comfort someone who has just hurt you, each time you say yes while your whole being whispers no, your body records it. It keeps the score in tension and burnout, in a vague sadness you can't quite name. This is not weakness, it is intelligence. Your body is not sabotaging your relationships, it is trying to protect your integrity. It is reminding you that empathy, which repeatedly violates your own limits, becomes a form of internal abandonment. The anxiety, the tightness, the exhaustion are not enemies to suppress, they are invitations to notice. The question is not, am I caring enough for others? The deeper question is, am I willing to care for myself with the same devotion? Listening to your body is often the first act of self-loyalty. It is the moment you stop negotiating away your pain in the name of compassion and begin recognizing that your nervous system has been telling the story all along. This version of empathy is costing me myself. Boundaries are not unkind, they are honest. Boundaries are so often misunderstood because many of us grew up in environments where saying no was labeled selfish, disrespectful, or unloving. So you learned to stretch yourself instead of disappoint others. You learned to smile while something inside you collapsed. You learned that the price of connection was your own silence. But a boundary is not a wall against others. It is a truth spoken in your own direction. A boundary simply says, this is my limit. This is where I end and you begin. It does not punish, attack, or humiliate. It does not require raised voices. It is the natural language of self-respect. When you set a boundary, you are not pushing someone away. You are choosing not to leave yourself. Can many people fear boundaries because they are afraid of losing love? In reality, what boundaries most often expose is the quality of love already present. The people who value you will adjust, become curious, or at least try to understand. The people who are benefiting from your lack of limits will call you cold, selfish, or changed. Their reaction is not a measure of your worth. It is a mirror of their dependence on your self-abandonment. Boundaries are honest because they reveal your inner reality. They say, this hurts, this is too much, this doesn't feel right in my body. They replace silent resentment with clear communication. They replace pretending with authenticity. Without boundaries, relationships become theaters where you perform calmness while drowning internally. You are not meant to be endlessly available, endlessly forgiving, endlessly accommodating. Love that demands the death of your truth is not love. It is dependency wearing a softer mask. Boundaries do not destroy intimacy. They make genuine intimacy possible. Only when you are allowed to be whole, to have preferences and limits, can another person truly know you. If setting a boundary feels painful, it is often because the younger part of you remembers what it cost to disappoint someone. But you are no longer that powerless child. You are allowed to choose yourself now. You are allowed to say, I care about you, and I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. A boundary is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the simple, quiet statement, I am here, to. Real compassion holds both realities at once. Their pain matters, and so does mine. Healthy empathy is not the art of disappearing. It does not ask you to shrink so others can expand. It does not require you to mute your pain so someone else can speak. Real empathy is spacious enough to hold two truths at once. What they feel matters, and what you feel matters too. When empathy becomes unhealthy, it tilts entirely toward the other person's experience. You lean so far into their story that you fall out of your own. You feel their sadness, their fear, their frustration, so vividly that your own inner world becomes faint, almost inconvenient. You begin to believe that caring means always stepping aside. But healthy empathy stands on 2 feet. It allows you to say, I see your pain, without abandoning the part of you whispering, and I am hurting too. It allows you to be compassionate without becoming invisible. It recognizes that you are not the container for everyone else's emotions. You are a living person with limits, needs, and a nervous system that deserves protection. Concluding yourself in empathy means you do not use compassion as a reason to stay where you are being diminished. It means you notice when giving begins to drain the color from your life. It means you allow your anger, your exhaustion, your loneliness to be valid signals, rather than flaws to be corrected. You no longer treat your needs as interruptions to someone else's story. Healthy empathy is grounded, it has roots. It says, I can understand why you are the way you are, and I still get to choose what is right for me. I can care about your wounds without sacrificing my own healing. I can listen to you without silencing myself. This form of empathy requires courage because it asks you to step out of the old role of the strong one, the healer, the one who can handle anything. It invites you to become honest about the cost of that role. It reminds you that martyrdom is not love and self-neglect is not compassion. When empathy includes you, your relationships change. They become less about rescuing and more about relating. Less about earning connection and more about sharing it. You stop negotiating your worth through how much you can endure and begin to measure closeness by how much of your true self is allowed to exist. Your tenderness is not meant only for others. Turn some of it inward. Healthy empathy says, gently and firmly, I will not disappear to prove that I care. Healing from overgiving is not about becoming harder or less caring. It is about coming home to yourself. For years you may have equated love with self-sacrifice, empathy with silence, and compassion with endurance. But there comes a moment when the soul grows tired of negotiating its own worth. That moment is not a failure, it is an awakening. You are allowed to keep your open heart and still protect it. You are allowed to be kind without being consumed. You are allowed to choose relationships where your needs are not an afterthought, but a living presence in the room. The world does not need you to disappear in order to be healed. It needs you present, honest, and whole. So as you move forward, let this be your quiet promise to yourself. I will listen when my body speaks. I will honor the limits I once ignored. I will offer empathy that includes me, not out of bitterness, not out of blame, but out of love, the kind that finally flows in both directions.